question. What happens when you crush entire sectors of your own economy for nearly 2 years and then, to compensate for your crime, you decide to inject trillions of dollars of freshly printed cash into the system? What happens if you do that? Well, honestly, we don't really know what happens when you do that because no one in history has ever been stupid enough to try it. It's going to be years before we really understand the consequences of all this, of our government's reckless coronavirus policy. But in the meantime, we can say with total confidence that the American economy is getting very weird. Not all of it. Some of what we're seeing isn't weird in the slightest. It was, in fact, entirely predictable. If you create trillions of U.S. dollars out of nothing, U.S. dollars are going to be worth less, much less. This is called inflation, and we're suffering through it right now. Inflation, very simply, is the result of too much money in the system. If you have too much of something, its value falls, supply and demand, remember? This is what's causing the rise in real estate prices and of Bitcoin and of other assets that investors run to when they no longer trust the country's currency. Why can't you afford a house right now? Simple, because Washington printed too much money. No one should be surprised by this. It's a cycle as old as money itself. Political leaders devalue the currency for short-term gain. In the end, this leads to long-term collapse. Debasing the coinage, that's what they used to call it. For example, by the middle of the 3rd century, the Roman denarius, the silver coin, was only about 2% actual silver. The rest of it was just junk. Within a few years, not incidentally, the entire Roman Empire blew up and the barbarians took over. But it wasn't just the Romans who did this. Every government devalues its currency at some point. They do it because it's irresistible. You can't not do it. If you do it, you get free money and you don't have to raise taxes. It seems like a great idea, but in the end, every government pays the price for doing this, or more precisely, its citizens do. So the current inflation, horrible as it is hardly unexpected. You'd really have to be a Fed chairman not to have seen it coming. What's confusing as hell is our labor market. The unemployment rate is higher than it was before COVID. Not a ton, but some. That means fewer people have jobs than did 2 years ago. Labor force participation, meanwhile, a slightly different measurement, is way down. And that means fewer people are working or even looking for jobs. So that's the picture on one side of the labor market. And yet, this is the truly bizarre part, we are simultaneously experiencing a serious labor shortage. So we have a shortage of labor and a glut of labor simultaneously. In some places, businesses have shut down because they can't find employees, as you well know if you live here. So again, at the very same moment, we have both too many workers and also too few workers. That does not make sense. How can that possibly be happening? And again, we're going to be honest and tell you we're not entirely sure how it's happening. No one is entirely sure. But we can tell you it's definitely not natural. This is not how markets are supposed to work. This is not a good sign. If you were running the country and you were a responsible person, you'd be very concerned about a trend like this. But our leaders don't seem especially concerned.